Imagine asking an AI model to do a task for which you do not give an example of how to do. You just give it instructions without showing the type of outcome that you want to achieve and hope it gets it right. And you know what? With our current models, it usually does. It does a pretty good job, I'll be honest. And that's what we call zero-shot prompting, which uses all of the model's data and knowledge that it has been pre-trained on to generate an answer. I'll give you examples of how to use it and when you should choose it instead of the other prompting techniques out there, such as one shot, few shot. Well, there's actually a long list, so if you're interested, I'm gonna post them on this channel. I see zero-shot prompting as one of the great superpowers of generative AI. Because when, for example, you ask a veteran engineer, a doctor, maybe a lawyer, maybe a writer to help, you usually don't give them examples of how to do a task. You just describe what it is that you want to accomplish. They're going to usually draw on their years of experience to understand your request and give you a solution, an answer, even if they have never done that exact task before. So similarly with generative AI, you can write in a couple of seconds a prompt that will do a task in a couple of seconds that might usually take you hours of manually doing it. You can literally give an entire article, paper, even a book, and simply ask it to summarize it, explain it, and it will do a pretty solid job generating it in seconds. And this superpower is something that most of us already take for granted, and it is a key way of how we use these generative AI models, ChatGPT, Gemini, you name them. And although there's currently no academic or industry sources that provide exact statistics of what proportion of all interactions with Gen AI models are zero-shot, I think we can certainly assume that's most of them. You know, Perplexity was even brave enough that it spat out an answer saying that it's roughly 55 to 70% of all interactions with LLMs being zero-shot. It references articles, but I didn't find it in those articles. But I guess for Perplexity, it's pretty easy to make this estimate if it's collecting all the data that you're giving it. So maybe it's correct. But yes, this already brings us to the first problem of zero-shot prompting. I mean, generating random facts like this is funny, but it's also dangerous because there will be people out there, including myself, that will not always be fact-checking this when they use it for whatever materials. Even worse, it might be published online, which then will actually turn to a fact theoretically, because it will be referenced by these very same models as actual sources where this made-up statistic exists. This will spread misinformation even further, and it will be cited so many times by each other that it might even be generally accepted to be a fact that was checked. And this is one of the first limitations of zero-shot prompting. At this stage, where the models are at, with this method, Gen AI will give you answers with facts, many facts in them, where some of them may not be correct. So if accuracy is important for the type of document or piece of work that you're making, you better fact check it. But before we go over the rest of limitations for this technique, here are some of the examples where zero-shot is best used compared to other prompting techniques. All right, let's see what you can do. You know, I'm pretty sure that you've tried some or most of these in action yourself, but maybe you'll get some inspiration on how else to use it. I'm going to use ChatGPT, free version, where I have not even logged in. So now I'm going to give you examples of when zero-shot prompting is the best technique to use above any other technique. Answering questions about broadly known topics. This is pretty useful when you're going out traveling, right? Explain which kind of power outlet cables are used in every country in Europe and America. So here we can see in US, Canada, Mexico, it's mostly type A, type B, type A, particularly in North America, right? So US, Canada, Europe. Europe has this thing called the Europlug. That's also a type E, type F, which are called Schuko plugs. Pretty good when you're online searching for the specific kind of plug. Search them by its name, right? Type G, type L, specifies in which countries, right? So type L, Italy, parts of Sweden. Type L, Italy, parts of Switzerland. South America is different. Explains how they're different. So voltages, socket types, adapters, summary even at the end. So I'd say this is a pretty useful answer. Next one is translations, especially for smaller translations, whether it's a sentence, a paragraph, maybe even a one-page document, but you probably couldn't translate the book. I haven't tried, but I just noticed when the volume increases a lot, then the output's quality also decreases. But please leave a comment if you tried also large-scale translations and it worked out pretty well for you. Curious to hear that. Just wasn't the case for me. And as an example, I'll ask it to translate the sentence in Spanish. Looking forward to meeting you tomorrow. I even added another sentence with some serious mistakes in there, as you can see. Let's see if it fixes it. All right, so it did find that there's typos in the original sentence. It did translate them anyways. My Spanish is absolute zero. Yup, it's correct. All right. It works, yeah. That's good. This next one, I haven't seen it being used a lot, but it's translating items.
Idioms.
So I'm going to use my native language to check how good this is. Let's try to be floating in the clouds. All right, so this is correct. This I can confirm. So good. It works, all right? The next one, I know a lot of people are using it to summarize larger pieces of text. I'll ask it to summarize the following article in 2 sentences, and I will upload an article about polar bears. So what I'll do is I'll drag everything this has to offer. I recommend that you add these quotation marks so it knows which text does it need to process. I'm now going to check how well did it summarize. Right, so it seems pretty accurate. The only thing that is weird about this is that it says that the populations are declining due to melting sea ice. So far so good, the same as the article, right? But the second part means that the population is also declining because of increased human interaction. The article here just says that increased human interaction is what comes because of the melting sea ice. So in the article, it says, yeah, it's just what happens, you know, because there's not much ice to live on. Now they're living on land. There's also humans. But the summary suggests that's actually because they're interacting with humans. Their population is declining. So this is the case. Like, it's pretty good at summarizing. But if this is important for you to include an article and to prevent plagiarizing, you better check it. Extracting key facts from text. I will use the same paragraph as we found about polar bears, and I will use quotation marks. Let's see. 3 most important facts. First of all, polar bears' role in ecosystem. They're apex predators, important for overall health within marine environment. Same as the article said, important aspect of Arctic people. Yep, that is correct. Vulnerable status, they're vulnerable. Sure. Yeah, this is pretty good. This important fact summary is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, let's be honest. If you're doing something professionally, you might need something more advanced. In this case, like, it just states what are the most important facts. It doesn't explain why. So good for general consumption, you know, yourself, skimming through an article. Using this professionally, don't think so. Another one you can use this for is brainstorming. When you're at the beginning stages of working on something, on a project. So I'll use it for suggesting 10 YouTube video ideas about using Gen AI in everyday life that are unconventional. Let's see what it comes up with. Enhanced morning routines from wake up to getting out the door. Does it really help with your stress? AI-generated cooking challenges, no recipes, just ingredients. You know, these are, I'd click on this. Some of these I might make myself. See, this is it, you know? I see this as a superpower. Like, think about it. I literally just wrote 1 sentence. Can you please give me ideas? Without describing what a good idea is, nothing like that. And it just gives good ideas. That's it. Whether there's market for it, whether it's something that people actually watch, something I need to still research and check. But I think I'd click on this, honestly. So pretty impressive, you know? So for brainstorming, something I can definitely build on. Providing definitions and explanations in many of educational subjects. So when you're studying for something or you're just learning something new and there's a definition, a word that you don't know, this is a quick way in like a couple of seconds to just search it up, you know? You don't need these crazy examples of what you want the outcome to be like that's an overkill. Just stating it in as simple of a sentence as I have here is enough. You're gonna get a good answer. So a hash table is a way of storing and retrieving data quickly. It works like a super efficient way to look things up by using special address or key to find a value. I think you guys used this before. I know many people would just use it as Google, and they do give pretty reliable answers to terms, definitions, what is this, what is that. So similarly, you can also ask it to explain a medical concept in simple terms. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll ask it to explain what are the different types of diabetes. There's type 1 that attacks and destroys the cells in pancreas, so it doesn't produce insulin at all. Type 2, where the insulin isn't used properly because your body doesn't have enough insulin. Gestational diabetes, it happens during pregnancy. All right, so obviously you're not gonna necessarily assume that how ChatGPT describes terms is better and more accurate than how a medical professional describes it. Because I'm sure you've also been in situations where you look something up and you think you know what you have based on the symptoms, and you go to the doctor and they're like, what are you talking about? Don't. You're gonna confuse yourself even more. It doesn't seem an optimal idea to self-diagnose your mental problems with the internet, or in this case, Gen AI, you know? Well, especially not with zero-shot prompting, where you don't even give context on what it is that you're experiencing having. So I don't know, but maybe I'm old school, you know? Another thing you can do is to simplify complex legal language. In this case, I'll ask it to simplify a clause so non-lawyer can understand it. So I'm just gonna, as an example, take one clause that is here. I asked it to simplify the following legal clause so a non-lawyer can understand it. Dutch civil code focuses on special contracts, which include things like buying a house, employment contracts, insurance, rental agreements. I looked at it when I compared it to the original one. Yeah, so the original text is somewhat comprehensible. It's just that there's a lot of references in between that clutter the text that obviously are important in law. And here it does also include them, but with more simple and direct words. So definitely an improvement. Maybe you have a complicated example where you need this to be used, and it should do a pretty good job also there. Keep in mind, as of now, everything you put in ChatGPT or any other AI model, unless it's on a private server or anything of that sort, anything you put there is safe. So only put and upload documents that you feel comfortable of it being accessible to these large language models. Just to keep in mind, you know, what is acceptable, what is not. That's something for each of us to decide. It's a choice between convenience and privacy, I guess. Writing emails or messages. That is pretty straightforward, but in this case, I'm gonna give it an example which is already formal, and I'll ask it to be even more formal and professional. Let's see what comes out. Yeah, so it is. So it is more formal, definitely. It works. All right, it works. That's a good way to use it. Another one is summarizing meeting notes that you have. For this, I asked to generate fake meeting notes. You could obviously use your real ones. I don't know why you would generate fake ones. I can't imagine a scenario where using fake meeting notes would be useful. Maybe. I asked it to summarize the transcript and or notes into 3 bullet points. Let's see how it does. All right, so I don't even have to read this because I've done this many times. It's just good. It just works. Sometimes it doesn't include exactly what you want it to include, so pretty important to still kind of use your own brain to add on top of it. But it will definitely add some relevant points. And usually when the summary that some points don't make sense, it's usually the fault of your notes not being as structured. It can be incomplete sentences, gaps between sentences, you know, logical gaps, no correlation. You don't give like a title between. It will be also pretty hard for a random person to whom you give notes that are not structured to make sense of it. So why would you expect an AI to do it, you know? Definitely good for summarizing as well. These are just some examples, but I think you have a pretty good idea of when zero-shot prompting is an appropriate technique to use. And it's generally for simpler general tasks where speed is prioritized over accuracy. All right, so I'll repeat that because if you take anything from this video of when zero-shot prompting is best used, it is for simple general tasks where speed, both typing and also generating the output, is prioritized over precision of the answer. Now I'm going to give some examples of cases where other techniques should be used instead of zero-shot prompting because of its limitations. And one of them would be highly specialized tasks. It's when you have something domain specific, something that demands high accuracy and a consistent, precise output, such as legal documents, medical reports, or complex technical reasoning. In those cases, you probably want to use other techniques such as few-shot prompting. Another one is when it needs to follow a particular style, structure, or format. For example, when you have many principles that the text needs to follow, and there are nuanced distinctions that need to be considered in that answer. That's where other models which use examples of the style, of the structure, of the format will definitely bring a better result. And this is connected to the next instance, which is when you need to extend an existing piece of work. For example, writing essays, articles, books, accept those kind of paragraphs or sections in your text that summarizes a certain section, paragraph, your summary. Summaries are pretty good. You know what? I take that back, because a summary will be decent, but it might not always provide a consistent format for the summary. So even then, other methods like the few shot technique will make sure that every time there's a summary, they're all relatively consistent in how they're being made. So yeah, it's just, if you're writing something, you should use it. You should use examples of what has already been written in your text so far, because pieces of work that are generated like the zero shot approach are painfully obvious to read, because this pre-trained model, all this data and knowledge that it uses before, it has common words and phrases that it's going to use in your text. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about now, because when you sometimes read the text, the author literally just wrote a simple, write an essay about how mountains are formed, and just put it in. That's it. Nothing added. There's these common words such as leverage. You know how many times I've seen leverage since OpenAI came out with ChatGPT? Maybe it was there before, but it's insane. It's insane. The model uses the word leverage so many times. I know there's countries that use leverage a lot. I won't name them just in case I'm wrong. But unfortunately, now every time I see the word leverage, I'm pretty certain it was made by AI. I don't know, maybe I'm just overreacting. But tell me, do you also feel like this when you see some words that became especially common in generating text with AI, and you read it in a different source and you're like, yeah, this probably was generated by AI, which doesn't obviously discredit the source, but it also doesn't exactly keep you guessing if what was generated is AI or not. And there's even sometimes instances where they keep the beginning or the ending of the Gen AI model's answer. Sure, here's an essay about mountains. And then there's the text. There's there's actually situations where people do not delete the first sentence where it admits that this is generated by AI. Or in this case, would you like me to make this essay more academic and formal with citations and geological terminology, or keep it narrative and poetic like this version? Another situation when not to use zero shot is when you have labeled example data already available, because then you might just go through the small inconvenience of copying and pasting the example of what you want the outcome to look like. It's going to save time, because you don't need to usually write an additional prompt, or you need to have less prompts written after it. And if you have an example already available, why not use it? Another one is if the task is complex, because the performance variability of how good the outcome is going to be every time you just write a zero shot prompt, it's going to be different. So it's going to change, so you won't have a reliably good answer every time, but you can have it with other techniques. For this reason, I'm going to recommend that you next watch this video about one-shot prompting. But yes, one-shot prompting is going to produce much more precise and accurate outcomes than the zero shot approach, and it's going to bring you one step closer to mastering prompt engineering, because most people will just use zero shot prompting and just say these ChatGPTs, these Grogs, these Geminis suck, they never understand what I want. This way they can.